Hey everybody, Don Zoldai here, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting, publisher at Autonomy Global. Welcome to the worldwide premiere here on the Autonomy Global Network. We're bringing you today a first and genuine look at a product launch that every asset owner and managing that is managing drone operations has wished existed, and now it does. So think about it, folks. Oil and gas facilities, right? Mining operations, large construction sites, utilities, ports, any complex sprawling site where drones or UAVs are flying around every single day, sometimes dozens of them at a time, sometimes with crewed helicopters and fixed wing aircraft in the mix. The person responsible for making sure none of these collide, most times they're doing this on a memory, whiteboards, and possibly just a prayer. Not good enough. Today's guest has built a solution for that problem, and we're revealing it here for the very first time. Joining me today is Dr. David Cole. He's the co-founder and CEO of FlyFreely, the enterprise drone operations management platform. I know that's a mouthful, everybody. It's trusted by some of the most demanding organizations in the world. So, David, welcome.
Thanks, Dawn. It's, really excited that we could, share this sort of premiere with Autonomy Global viewers. So it's a real thrill for us.
Well,
Um,
we're honored to have you. And what I want to do first before we get into your management platform is tell us briefly about yourself and your mission.
yeah, so our background is well, one thing if you can't tell with the accent, we're from Australia originally. So I'll give a crikey. Everyone loves a good crikey. Um, but we started out as a drone service provider here in Australia back in 2013. Doing a lot for the mining, construction, agricultural sectors. And in that journey, we had our own challenge of managing our own operations. So we actually went and built a software platform to do that. And then we had our customers asking us, could they leverage that to manage their own operations as they started to build their own drone programs. And then we pivoted the whole business into the software platform, and that's what we do now. So really, highly motivated to build something that works really well for the end users because we know how hard operations is. So we try to make it as easy as possible so people can, start flying and keep flying.
All right, very good. So we've got a little bit of a taste about FlyFreely. Give us that 30-second flyover. Who uses the platform and at what scale?
Yeah, so really the customers who get the most value out of the platform are typically what we call asset and site owners. So generally, mining, oil and gas, water utilities, electrical infrastructure, that have a lot of pilots and a lot of drones operating across a whole gamut of different applications and really dealing with the end-to-end life cycle of the whole process from all the way through the planning, through compliance, maintenance, and even into more advanced operations, which we'll sort of talk to today in terms of airspace management.
Okay, excellent. So let's talk about the problem that you set out to solve with this product launch. So paint the picture for the audience, David. What's actually happening on these sites today?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting to see how the industry, it started out just trying to get a drone up in the air and do something. Now there's lots of drones on site, like you mentioned, we're hearing customers have 10, 12 simultaneous operations happening on one site. So it's now shifted from just getting started to now this is creating a new problem, which is a good problem to a certain degree. It means
Right.
lots of activity. Um, so now you've got lots of drones, and there's typically a UAS program manager who's got the job of, um, managing all those operations, which is great. So they typically have very good visibility of their own internal operations of what's happening. However, the feedback we're getting from just about everyone in the industry is they don't really know what's everyone else is doing. So whether that's contractors on site, there's crewed helicopter operations happening, There's even just general hazards on site, such as there's some construction and a crane's popped up. There's some birds nesting over here at this time of the year, so we can't go over there. Or some blast is scheduled. Um, that's so those things affect aviation, even though they're not necessarily aviation activities on their own.
So all these things that you just mentioned, the bird nest, the pop-up construction, the helicopters flying around, where is all that information exactly on any given day?
Yeah, this is another really interesting thing we're learning from customers. It's kind of everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So a lot of it's in emails, believe it or not. Some people try with a whiteboard to coordinate this activity. Other people put it in a spreadsheet. You'll have phone calls happening. So, and the person who's trying to coordinate all this they're trying to do this all in their head essentially.
Wow.
And it's really, really difficult. And it's now just the sheer volume of operations is now becoming quite problematic.
Well,
And
I was going to say, it sounds like a genuine safety risk, David. I
it
mean,
it,
and,
it
and it
is.
also, yeah, it also sounds like that aviation coordinator is essentially like a single point of failure, possibly.
Yeah, and their reaction, believe it or not, is to kind of say, well, I'm going to limit or stop drone operations completely, right? Because it is creating a risk potentially to crude aviation, um, which can be a loss of life incident if a collision occurs. So it's there's a lot of pressure on those people performing that role.
Well, and it seems unsustainable, right? I mean, if you're talking about scaling things and even getting bigger over time, which I would assume most companies would want on their sites, this creates a big problem. I believe we have maybe a map to show a little bit of this problem. Here we go. Talk us through what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so this is a typical sort of view of what the internal operations look like, right? So you have generally good visibility of those. You can, go in and see the actual UAS missions that are planned, and that's all, pretty standard now, um, and gives the aviation coordinator or program manager a good overview of what's actually happening with drones. Um, but as I mentioned, what it's currently lacking is really the other pieces of information around other activities on site that's occurring. So we've pulled together essentially three sort of different tools together to to make some airspace management tools.
Oh,
And the first of those is what we're calling LOTAMs. So this is actually came from a suggestion from a customer. They were like, I want NOTAMs, but I want them for my sites, kind of like a LOTAM. And so we're like, great idea. Can we
new
borrow
term,
that? So
everybody,
yeah,
write it
new
down.
term.
Yep.
Yeah. So as it says, it's kind of like a local NOTAM. The second is what we're strategic deconfliction. So now you've got visibility of what's happening. How do you coordinate that? And then the third piece is what we're calling our sort of daily operations view, which is really the one page where you go and you'll see everything in one place.
Okay, excellent. So let's start at the top then. Let's start with the low TAMs. I love that. Uh, you're using it in a new context here, right? No TAMs, but local. So walk us through it.
Yeah, like it's actually it's kind of a well-established tool in aviation, in traditional aviation, if you'd call it that. And the thing about NOTAMs is no one likes them because they're horrible to read and interpret. So it's really setting up a new type of uh, way of conveying that information in aviation, in traditional aviation, if you'd call it that. And the thing about NOTAMs is no one likes them because they're horrible to read and interpret. So it's really setting up a new type of uh, way of conveying that information that's a bit more digital friendly and user friendly. Um, so it's bringing those local activities that you need to inform other people about.
Yeah, give us some ideas. What kinds of hazards or events would you normally log into a NOTAM in your system or a LOTAM in your
Yeah,
system?
yeah. Yeah, so the current really um, quite frequent use case that we're getting with sort of our early adopter customers is a lot of contractors. So having a quick and easy way for a contractor to put in what their intentions are, right? Where they're going to be operating on site. The other really key one is the crewed aviation activity. That's actually probably the most important and relevant at the moment.
Yeah.
And then all the way through, like we discussed, through to um, birds, or there might be some, agricultural spraying happening on site somewhere, or even sort of permanent hazards, right? Like you've got a flare stack that's constantly flaring, so you really don't want to have any UAS operations near that. So you might put that as a permanent LOTAM, same as like a permanent NOTAM.
All right.
Um,
And so you can have permanent things on there, but on a daily basis, it's really like a breathing, living operational picture, if you will. Is that kind of a great, way to think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's meant to be fully live, dynamic. You can change it. We were even doing some initial work with a mining company where they have their blasting schedule in another piece of software. So we're really connecting with that software to pull through their blasting schedule. So to make it even easier for them and visible for the actual drone pilots when they're planning their operations. So um, and we're seeing more and more of this where there's different digital systems and trying to tie it all together and bring it together in one place.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine like having a different system talking about your blasting schedule and then,
Yeah,
and then your
exactly.
like operational picture somewhere else, or even doing that by email, because I know at least I did, and I imagine some of these people get also hundreds of emails a day and trying to find something that's important like that's a safety issue. That's incredible. So I think we have a video to kind of walk us through what this LOTAM actually looks like and how it works. So let's go ahead and roll that.
Yeah, so the principle of the system is really again about conveying information, right? So um, one of the first things you can do is actually go and define some geometry and actually sort of draw visually where you're operating. But once you've done that, you can then start to fill in details. So this is, time schedules, who the points of contact are, giving it priorities and types. So you can define your own types of LOTAMs. So it's in a language that the team on site understands. That was kind of one of our learnings with initial customers, is trying to contextualize all this and make it relevant. Um, and then all the way through to putting in any contact details of the relevant person, and then setting flags on, is this just a general advice? Does it require acknowledgement? So as we'll see a bit later on, um, if there is a conflict, the pilot, when they're planning, will have to be forced to acknowledge that at a minimum. And then attaching any other sort of pieces of information along the way. But yeah, so here we see zooming in on site and actually starting to draw some geometry of where you're planning to operate. And the tools are really simple, um, sort of standard tools that everyone's used to in sort of mapping software. So make it really easy to zooming in on site and actually starting to draw some geometry of where you're planning to operate. And the tools are really simple, so make it really easy to actually go in there and define what you're looking at, and
So
even give it some pretty colors.
it's all about the pretty colors.
Exactly.
So who's doing this work, Dave? In other words, who can create these LOTAMs? Does it have to be an aviation coordinator, or can pilots and contractors log in and make their own annotations as well?
Yeah, correct. Anyone can, you know, go into the system and do this. We deliberately design it to be really flexible and configurable. So anyone can actually go in there and make one. But this then raises almost like we're crowdsourcing the knowledge across the site.
Yeah,
Um,
like
and
Waze, right? When you're driving, like, is
yeah,
the hazard still here? Check yes. Yeah.
yep, yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we're now seeing is it's getting quite popular, right? So you start having everyone sort of populating it with different bits and pieces, and then it does potentially transfer into, okay, is that too much information? Or is it noise? Do we have to set up some sort of approval mechanisms, control mechanisms? So we're working through that with our early access customers to just fine tune how that process should work. Because ultimately you want to try and bring the most important things to the surface at a minimum, but at the same time, being able to really understand what's going on at a glance.
Yeah, well, speaking of important things and what's going on, that really is a great bridge, I think, to the second feature, this strategic deconfliction you mentioned. So walk us through that and how it actually works in practice.
Yeah, so now we've kind of got the low TAMs and we've got some awareness of what's happening. We can now start to look at that when we're going to plan a mission. So, when a pilot goes to plan, those low TAMs will pop up, and it'll essentially, tell them what's happening in their area of operation. And there might be some conflicts where, the pilot then has to adjust the mission plan. Um, or it may be an advisory where they can just say, yep, I understand that, but I don't really need to change anything. Um, so they can start to be very confident that what they're doing is not going to conflict with anyone else on site. So very, very simple principles, but incredibly powerful once you put them in one place where everyone can see everything.
Well, I love the fact that you have that kind of acknowledgement piece that a pilot has to acknowledge the low TAM before they can proceed. And then, other restrictive options that you have also in the software, because it's almost like you put the safety logic into the workflow itself rather than relying on people to have to think through it or mentally create their own checklist. So good on you, because I mean, anything you can do to kind of take that workload off the pilot, I think is a bonus.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And another thing we're fine tuning now is how strict should that enforcement be, right? For those particularly hazardous ones like the crewed aircraft, does that then trigger an approval process and things like that? Just to make sure that you're, very confident that you're not going to be conflicting with any other operations.
Well, once again, pictures painting thousands of words. Let's go ahead and roll that video and show us deconfliction in action.
Yeah, so this is an example. So the yellow areas there, they're actually low TAMs that have been predefined. And then we've got different types of operations. But going through the mission planning process here, this is, the standard sort of mission planning process. And then when you start to actually draw your area of operations and see where you're going to be operating, all this information will now start popping out visually.
Oh, wow. So
So
the
that
yellow
so
are the
that
low TAM areas?
correct, yeah. And so this is like the first phase is you kind of get an instant view of these are the things that are happening, around where I'm planning to operate. Then we'll take that information and then actually start to do the checks. So systematically checking clashes on heights, altitudes, and time. So both temporal and spatial, we're looking at those conflicts and trying to detect them. And then obviously pulling that information through. And then if you have to acknowledge it, it'll bring you up all the information that was put in. So it's super easy. You don't have to go digging in emails and PDFs and all sorts of things that people try to do. It's all kind of in one place. And then depending on how your workflow is set up, you can then set additional approval mechanisms. So it will force the operator and pilot to actually put in everything they need, which will then go off to another person for an approval. So tying together all the elements and making it super, super simple, right? So we see that, I don't know how long that video was, maybe 1 or 2 minutes to fully plan and deconflict the entire operation. So we think it's going to be quite powerful and really enable a lot more operations to occur and more complex operations to occur.
Well, that approval piece I think is critically important. I mean, you know that I'm an attorney, and as I think these things, now you've got a record as well. So just like the LOTAMs, are these somewhat kind of customizable in terms of approvals? In other words, if I'm, management, because now, right, David, we know under Part 108, there's going to be some corporate responsibility
Yep.
possibly. If I'm in charge, can I force a formal approval gate at a certain, for certain hazards or certain LOTAMs that every time that's going to pop up and somebody has to like check a box and say, I got it, I see it, I'm going to go around it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so where we've seen this crop up is actually like the environmental teams on site
Mm,
might have a particular area that they've sort of flagged, and they actually need to sign off on it because there's other responsibilities, not specifically aviation related.
right.
And normally that would be going through another internal system to try and do that approval. Again, it's probably an email. So we can now kind of pull that in. So the right people are getting the right information. Again, just making that pilot's job so much easier.
I never really would have thought about that, but that makes an abundant amount of sense. And I love how, because I've heard departments of transportation brief, for example, about their drone programs and all the different stakeholders, even within a
Yeah.
DOT, that, might have to kind of have input. So, wow, that they can also inject into it and be a part of the system. So, third prong is this daily operations view. Tell us
Yeah.
what it is, who uses it, and when they would use it.
Yeah, again, it's another thing with based on customer feedback. The sort of program UAS program managers and aviation coordinators map is awesome, but they also want uh, to see everything that's coming up during the day, but also even generating reports. So literally, they really want a printed report with everyone's phone numbers and everything for all the different operations happening, where they're happening, so they can really quickly, if something's changed. And they need to sort of urgently respond. All those details are on hand. So, even though we're in the digital age, people still like to go back to the pen and paper sometimes. So, we cater for both approaches.
Well, and this is kind of your tactical level. This is what's happening today. It's almost like in the DoD world, pilots doing the pre-brief, if you will. So again, show us what this looks like.
Yeah. So this is, and again, it's a really simple view. So, down the bottom, you essentially got some really quick access buttons. So you can, at a click, what's today, what's in the next 3 days, what's in the next sort of week. And then look at the different authorities that apply and the different operations, what their status is, drill into all those details. So again, just really quite simple and easy to use. So everything's at the fingertips of the person who's overseeing all of these operations. And
And
then
yeah, go ahead, please.
yeah, as I mentioned, yeah, then we built a very basic report, which is essentially summarizing everything, so they can just print it out and share that at any potential briefings that are happening on site.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, like you said, people love their pens and papers, but in terms of the digital version that you just shared with us, that's time dynamic, right? In other words, things
Correct.
could change, and we know they do throughout a given day. So if I was a site manager or a leader in an organization, I'd probably want to be tapped into your program and watching those changes in real time. That's what it can do, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. A lot of the use cases, you know, these people are, essentially, yeah, monitoring this continuously, trying to understand what's coming up, what's happened, particularly if there's delays. So one of the most challenging things is when you have delays and everything's scheduled and then rescheduling.
Yeah.
So all those sorts of challenges crop up, right, which you can't plan for. So having a and sometimes people finish early, so they'll have a planned operation and they'll finish early, which means someone else can actually start, and that the coordinator can basically say, "Hey, you're now free to start now." So it enables that operational efficiency side of things as well.
So that's an interesting outcome. Sometimes customers have actually been able to open up more airspace because
Yep.
of these tools. It almost seems counterintuitive. Like, can you explain this a little bit more?
Yeah, again, yeah, it's been super interesting, particularly around some of the crude operation activity. It was with a couple of customers, they would literally just shut down all drone operations for half a day or all the day, just out of abundance of caution of any conflicts. So they're far more confident to start having these different um, operators, operating either simultaneously or within a very close time period of each other. So it's enabled them to start doing a lot more with their drones.
All right. So maybe fewer blanket restrictions, more missions. That's more value. I mean, when you give people back time, we all know time is money, so that's adding a lot of value to people's programs, David. So good on you. So, all right, this is where you are today. Tell us what's on the roadmap, what's happening next.
Yeah, so obviously we've now kind of got a foundational piece here. So we're obviously looking to extend on that, and already we're hearing some of the uh, requests from customers about even more collaboration, particularly from crude operators. So allowing them to actually plan their own missions in the platform. So it's not just the load TAM, but it's actually like a proper planned mission with all the appropriate approvals associated with that. Um, so yeah, being a lot more and sharing that information. So we've actually got one use case where there's a customer and their neighbor is another company with another refinery, and they actually want to start sharing these low TAMs and information
Oh,
across site.
wow. That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so things like that, which we never anticipated. But it's one of their concerns, and they're trying to be good neighbors, right? They're trying
Yeah.
to help each other out. So really really cool stuff there. And then the other one that everyone's excited about is at Part 108 and what that's going to bring and the opportunities that's going to bring. More automated operations on site. You're going to need a way to manage all that. So that's a big piece of what we're building is to seamlessly enable your Part 107 people doing simple operations and your Part 108 people or contractors doing Part 108 operations simultaneously in the same platform, all managed with their appropriate constraints and requirements they need to meet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Part 108, as we all know, it's going to be a really big focus for enterprise operators and everybody. The landscape is moving fast, but let's just kind of get to the point. Who exactly did you build this for, and how do they get started?
Yeah, yeah. So it is for the companies that typically have more complex operations, just a higher volume in a concentrated space. So it is those sort of asset and site owners, and typically have a mixture of operations. So they'll have an internal team. They'll be using some contractors. We'll have some crewed aviation activities as well. Um, so that's really who gets the most benefit out of it. Um, but in terms of finding out more, yeah, reach out. We can provide you a demo, and builds a customized trial experience, so you can actually, in your context, see how it would work and the benefits it can bring.
So LOTAM, strategic deconfliction, daily ops, are all of these capabilities available like right now?
Yes, so we've only just rolling it out to some early adopter customers. We'll be doing really another launch or I guess a broader release later in the year at Energy, Drones and Robotics. But in the meantime, for Autonomy Global viewers, we will happily give you access to the capability as part of a trial or proof of concept if you want to have a look at it right now. So, you know, it's, again, only for AGN viewers. So, yeah, we'd welcome any interested parties to participate in that.
Amazing. Well, you heard it here, folks. If you're watching on AGN, make sure you tell David when you reach out to him that you want that trial and you saw this on Autonomy Global Network. Well, David, what a fantastic overview to everything you've built there at FlyFreely. I mean, it's genuinely solving an enterprise drone problem that operators have been living with and duct taping things together for years. So, any final words for those asset and site owners that are watching right now?
Oh, look, I mean, we know, and what we hear is drones are now becoming like a critical part of operations now, day-to-day operations. And when they lose the capability, it hurts. So,
Yes.
anything we can do to help, you know, companies maintain that capability and grow it is really what we're interested in. And then integrating it into the broader enterprise systems of the company.
Well, beautifully said. Dr. David Cole here, co-founder, CEO of FlyFreely. Thank you so much for joining us on this worldwide premiere. And thank you to all of our viewers out there. If you got value from this episode, please share it with a colleague that's managing an enterprise UAV program, because this is exactly the kind of tool they need to know about. Links to FlyFreely are in our notes. And again, if you want that free demo, just mention AGN when you speak with David. That's all she wrote for now. Until next time, I'm Don Zoldi. This is the Autonomy Global Network, and we are out here.